Okay.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Racing Form Jockey Club Gold Cup Day handicapping session. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatale, back with you. Very excited to have reconvened a panel who've had some real success in this format, giving out winners and analyzing races over the last few months. That team consists of DRF's own New York handicapper, Mike Beer. Mike, how are you tonight?
I'm good, Pete. Thanks for pulling this thing together again and for asking me to join in. I'm happy to be here.
Well, it is I who should be thanking you, but I'm happy that you're happy to be on the panel along with Timeform US analyst David Aragona. David, what's happening?
Doing pretty well. Jockey Club Gold Cup Day is always one of my favorites. I know the stakes lineup changes a little bit over the years, but it's always a great race.
They do bounce things around. What I think we should do, we're going to keep the show lean and mean tonight, looking to come in around 30 minutes or a few more. I think we should start with the late pick four so we can dig our teeth into these stakes races. And then if you gentlemen have any thoughts that you're particularly excited about on the rest of the card, we'll intervene with those. But I do want to mention that we are presented today by Naira Bets, special Naira Bets pick four this weekend, where you have the opportunity to play two races from Belmont, two races from Keeneland in a very exciting cross-country pick four. And the first race we're going to talk about, the Champagne Grade 1 from Belmont, is I believe that's the first leg of that cross-country pick four. We'll also encourage folks to go to nairabets.com for a variety of offers. Naira Bets doing a great job of putting horse players' needs at the fore, and something that everybody should be checking out. Not only a great betting platform, but a lot of amazing information, including HD replays available through the Naira website, something everybody should be checking out. But with that out of the way, let's talk about the Champagne. Mike, I'm going to start with you. How do you view this race?
I think it's a wide open kind of race as far as I can tell. I mean, it's, the way the 2-year-old racing is conducted now in this country, you wind up with a lot of races like this. There's just not a lot of experience in here. It's a field of 12, but 3 of them are maidens. Most of them have only won once. And they're just all really lightly raced. And so to me anyway, that just sort of, makes these races a little bit tougher. I sort of took 2 positions on the race. One of them is that I really do like Honorable Treasure, who will take money in this race, 90 buyer speed figure, breaking his maiden at Saratoga in a race that was scheduled for turf. And, I sort of get that it's, it's an off the turf race, and, you have to be a little careful with races like that, but he didn't beat a bunch of turf horses there. The horse that was second to him, it's actually a pretty fast and pretty talented dirt horse, as much as going to run in the Breeders' Futurity at Keeneland. So he beat a good horse, and I really liked the way that he beat him too. I mean, I was pretty impressed with the way that horse won. And so he's the horse who I just sort of like most in the race. The other horse who, just sort of is the horse who I feel like I have to use is Enticed, Kieran McLaughlin's Godolphin horse. He's got the big pedigree. I really liked his debut. Another one who was on a wet track. Things you want to be careful with when horses look good, but he just looked to me like a sort of colt who really does have some real ability, and he's bred that way, and he's got the right connections. I mean, he got really green. He took a lot of dirt early in that race, and it didn't seem like he liked it all that much. But once he got out into the clear, this horse really ran. He's cross-entered into the Breeders' Futurity. It sounds like Kieran's going to run him here. To me, he's a horse I have to use in this race. I really like those 2 horses the most. And the other horse who I'm just going to use at a price, and this just may be a simple case of, too much too soon, and it's not the right spot, but the 10 full of run for Jason Service. He's going to go from 5.5 to 8 furlongs, and he just broke his maiden, and he's going to go into a Grade 1 race. But buyer speed figure aside, it wasn't a fast race. I love the way this horse broke his maiden. He was really, really impressive, and I think this horse has a lot of ability, and I'm using him at a price. And the other position that I had on the race Not that there were that many horses who I'm just like, strongly against, but, they made the two morning line favorites, the 6 Good Magic and the 11 Has It. And, I guess, I maybe they'll turn out to be the two best horses in this race. I didn't see anything about them that necessarily made me want to take them at short prices. I won't be surprised if they both run well, but I didn't love the debut runs from these two horses. It was opening day, or the opening race on Travers Day. I don't know, short field, a bunch of horses scratched out of there. The pace wasn't fast. They went sort of 1-2 around the track. I guess they both ran fine, and they're obviously both cut out to be nice horses, but I don't know. I don't really need them as the two favorites in here. So I was going to sort of be against them and, sort of lean more on the, the 3 horses that I just talked about at the Open.
It is a race that seems to have plenty of question marks between the inexperience of the field, the questions to be answered in terms of the distance. I definitely understand your inclination, Mike, to maybe not be so interested in the trainers that always catch money with the morning line favorites. David, is that your approach as well? Is this a race where you're looking for a horse who might be a price, at least according to the morning line?
Yeah, I think this is really the make or break race in this late pick 4 sequence, because either if you have a strong opinion and you can get that opinion home in this first race, or if you just want to spread and find a price here, I feel like this is the race where you want to do that, because the rest of the sequence, we'll talk about it, I think it's pretty logical the rest of the way. So if you can make something happen here, I think that could really make the pick 4 pay well. The problem is just finding that strong opinion, because like Mike was kind of getting at, there's a lot going on in here, and it's really difficult to separate these horses given how few of them have faced each other, and the fact that all of them are so inexperienced. I'm kind of with Mike in that I guess given the speed figure that he earned, Honorable Treasure is kind of the horse to beat in this race. Just to expand upon what Mike said, the horse that finished second, Esmosh, came back and ran 8 points higher next time when he broke his maiden, 3-time Formula S speed figure points higher. So, the speed figure of that race totally stands up. A bunch of other horses came out of that race to run back on turf and run very well. So, there were some decent horses in that race, and it's not like he was a surprise. Off doing no running in his debut, they knew he was going to run that day. He was bet down to 7-2 odds, and he ran. So I think that horse has some talent. The problem is there's speed in this race. There's speed to his outside with Has It. There's speed to his inside. So we've got to avoid getting caught up in any kind of pace duel. But I do think he's kind of the one that I'm reasonably sure is going to run pretty well here. But there are plenty of other contenders. When I was first looking at this race, I kind of was leaning towards Enticed. I was kind of looking at him in the same way that Mike was. Kieran McLaughlin has awesome numbers of horses like this. 2-year-old horses that won their debuts, coming back on their second starts in graded stakes on the dirt. He's 4 for 8, 50% with an ROI over $5 over the past 5 years. So, he gets these horses to really improve out of their debuts when they win. The only problem with this horse for me is that I just feel he beat a really weak field that day. The speed figure came back slow, which isn't as much of a problem for me. It's just I didn't think that was a strong field. There was a Pletcher horse in there that got bet that did no running, and the rest of the field it looks like they may just stink. So that bothers me a little bit. But he's bred to be okay. He's out of It's Tricky, who was a grade 1 winning router, and he's supposed to improve with distance. I just feel like I don't want to really hang my hat on this horse improving that much. Although I feel like I have to use him somewhere. I saw that they made Has It and Good Magic the 2 shortest prices on the morning line. I'm kind of against Has It of those two. I just feel like if one of the two is going to improve stretching out, it's probably Good Magic and Has It. Some people might say that the rail was the place to be on Travers Day, and Has It was, towards the rail the entire way and setting that extremely slow pace. I guess that Good Magic was up close to it too, but he was, 2 to 3 wide all the way, and he just seems like the horse that's supposed to move forward out of that. He's by Curlin. The Dam was a stakes-winning router. So I do feel that Good Magic is the horse you want. It's that when you're taking a maiden in a race like the Champagne, you expect to get some kind of price on that horse, and it doesn't feel like you're going to get that with Good Magic. So he's another one that I'm using, but I'm not in love with him. I do think you want to use the New York bred Avinu Malpenu somewhere. I know that the race that he's coming out of, the horses that have run back out of that race, What a Catch, who was third, and Ineliable Rights was second, They really took a step backwards in their next start in the Bertram Bongard. But, kind of setting that aside for a second, I do think this horse has run really well in his races. Not that there were intense speed biases or inside biases on the 2 days that he ran in Saratoga, but I mean, you do want to take notice when a 2-year-old comes from off the pace and gets, wide trips at the Saratoga meet. He overcame that on both occasions. He's kind of finished up like a horse that really isn't going to mind stretching out to a mile. So I think there's a question of quality with him, but I just really have liked his first 2 races. He's very professional. He's not going to mind coming from off the pace in here. I know the Time Formula US pace projector kind of has him placed up closer to the pace, but it's really tough to make pace projectors in races where the horses are so inexperienced. I really don't think he's going to be one of the ones that's going to be involved in a duel in this race. He's probably going to take back and make one run. So I kind of trust him along with Honorable Treasure. Those are kind of the 2 that I would lean on in this race. Like Mike said, I'm interested in Full of Run. I just kind of the same thing as with Enticed. I don't know what he was beating in his debut. He's got to do that stretch out from 5.5 furlongs to a mile. I think you want to get a price on him as opposed to what you might get with Enticed. I think you actually will get a price on Full of Run. So if you like him, I think he's one that you might want to include. The other horse that they just want to have somewhere, I mean, I feel like I'm talking about the entire field, but this is the race you want to do it in, is Cowboy Karma on the rail. I know his last race at Monmouth was disappointing. He lost as the 1-2 favorite, but he got a somewhat uncomfortable trip to the final half of that race, just kind of having to weave his way through horses, and he kind of got spun out wide coming off the turn. And I thought he finished up well enough that he showed he got the mile distance, and cutting back to the 1 turn mile is actually even better for him because I don't know how far he ultimately wants to go, but he can pass horses. We've seen that. He won his first 2 races very visually impressively. So I want to have him somewhere on my tickets. He's another one that I'm not totally in love with, but I feel like he could get a little lost in here. And, I want to have coverage to a few horses that are going to be in the 10 to 12 to 1 range.
A lot of good ideas there, and definitely a race that makes sense to spread given the lack of being standouts of horses who are going to probably be close to those short positions on the morning line. Maybe use them defensively, try to reach for a price, and get this late pick 4 at Belmont on Saturday kicked off the right way. The second leg of that pick 4 is the 9th race, the Hill Prince restricted stake, grade 3 level for 3-year-olds going a mile and an 1/8 on the turf. Plenty of familiar names in here. David, does this one narrow down a little bit more for you?
I think it does. I think this race is, of the races in this pick 4 sequence, this one is going to be pretty logical. I think you have to start with a discussion of the Saranac because there were a few things going on in that race. I mean, first of all, that race was run on the Mellon Turf course at Saratoga late in the meet when they had taken the rails down, and being right on the hedge at that time of the meet when, the course hadn't really taken a lot of rain yet, and it was very hard, it was carrying speed. Not that the winner Voodoo Song didn't run well, because he did, but he was on the best part of the track, and I think you want to pay attention to the horses that got those wider trips, and obviously the horse that was most compromised in that race is Bricks and Mortar, because not only was he not on the rail at any point in that race, but Joel Rosario, I get his thinking in that, the speed was kind of getting away from the field, and you don't want to let those kinds of horses get away, especially given the way the turf course was playing at Saratoga. But he made this premature move down the backstretch to get Bricks and Mortar into the race, kind of making up about 6 lengths in the span of, seemed like a 16th of a mile. And, you just don't want to make that kind of move on the turf. And it really detracted from Bricks and Mortar's late kick, which is typically, pretty strong. All things considered, I thought he did well to get within a length of the winner at the wire. It's just, you weren't winning on the Saratoga turf course with that kind of trip. And this time, there's not a ton of speed in this race, and it's not like Bricks and Mortar is exactly slow. So I expect him to kind of take up position in behind horses like Secretary at War and Frostmourne and kind of pull that stalking trip like he got in the Hall of Fame. If that happens, I think he's probably the most likely winner. There's somewhat of a question about him getting a mile and an 1/8 because he was getting a little leg weird at the end last time, but I think that was more due to the trip. And for me, he's just the horse to beat, though I do respect Yoshida, who beat him last time. This horse just seems to, maybe a mile and a quarter was too far for him in the Belmont Derby, but every other race he's run, he's just showing up all the time, and he seems pretty adaptable. He can be up closer, he can come from further off the pace. He's got a great post for this mile and 1/8 configuration at Belmont. So for me, they're kind of the two, and I don't want to lean too heavily on Bricks and Mortar because they're both really talented horses. The one that I'm kind of struggling with is Frostmourne. I guess he's going to take money too. I've never been that sold on him going farther than a mile. I know that he finished well in the Kent last time, but he just wasn't facing horses at this caliber on that day. And I guess he's going to pull the perfect trip, being the one that takes over from Secretary of War at the top of the stretch. And, they've got to run him down. I have trouble gauging his overall quality because he kind of skipped the really tougher races in this division. So, this is really the day he's got to prove it. If he's, around 5-1, I could bet him. But if he's his morning line price, which I think he's the morning line favorite at 5-2,
Indeed.
I probably don't want to bet him at that price. So
I think that's a really good point. Super good point about Frostmourne. I mean, these are restricted races to begin with, and this is a horse who has been contesting the second tier of the restricted races against some horses who've shown some real ability. I think that's a great point about the trip on Bricks and Mortar last time too, David. It sure seemed like Rosario felt / correctly realized that nobody was going to do the dirty work, tried to do it himself. And it definitely took some of the sting out of that impressive finish that he'd shown. Mike, where are you with this race? Are you also leaning against Frostmourne and towards the horses coming out of the Saranac?
I am. I don't really have a lot to disagree with what David said. I mean, as far as Frostmourne goes, I don't, I do think he's a talented horse. I mean, I think if you watch his races and, he's run 6 times now, I think you can go back and watch basically any one of them and sort of understand that he's a talented horse.
Sure.
But you're talking about, a horse who, his last 2 wins, they're both really impressive. They're fast enough to make him a contender in here. He's just not beating good fields. And, and I am bothered by the fact that he hasn't run against, the good horses, even in this division all summer long, because he missed all those races. And, for whatever reason it is, Clement didn't like the way he was training up to the Secretariat or whatever that was. I don't love stuff like that. I think he can win this race. I'm with David as far as price goes. 5-2 is not for me. If he drifts, I guess I could use him, but I kind of want to see him beat a good field like this before I really buy into him. As far as the Saranac horses go, yes, I think Bricks and Mortar is the one that you want out of that race. I guess getting shut off badly at the start like he did just sort of, put him behind the 8 ball, and Rosario made the move that he made and it didn't work out. But he still ran, a nice race in there. I think he's a good horse. I'm struggling with that race and with those 2 horses in particular. I like Bricks and Mortar. I don't think he's any kind of superstar. I think he's a good horse. And I think he'll get a better trip in this race, and maybe that's all it will take. But I also think he might be the favorite in here. And I don't know. I mean, is he better than these horses? Maybe. I'm not so sure. Yoshida to me is just a horse who I don't want. I'm just done with this horse. He was really impressive early on. I'll give him the 1.25 mile excuse for the Belmont Derby. Maybe it was too far. I don't know what his excuse was for the Hall of Fame, and I know he was only beaten 3/4 of a length. But to me, that was not, some kind of super good performance in there. I thought he ran fine, and that's all I think it was fine. And last time, sure, he got hung up a little bit through the second turn, maybe held up behind horses for a brief instant. He got clear. He fired down the outside. It looked to me like he just had a full head of steam and was going to go by late in that race after Bricks and Mortar went after Voodoo Song on the lead, and he didn't get by in there. And I don't know. I'm kind of done with him. He's going to take money in here. I'm just kind of done with him. I'd much rather have Bricks and Mortar than him. My other opinion in the race is that, and this just might be, foolish thinking, and, maybe I'm giving this horse too much credit, but I'm giving Ticonderoga, Chad Brown's other horse, a chance in this race. His 2-year-old form is really good. He was just a big, goofy 2-year-old who didn't really know what he was doing out there, but you could tell that he had talent. And after he won his 3-year-old debut this year in the Palm Beach, and he was really good that day, just sort of felt like he could maybe just win all the big races in the 3-year-old turf division this summer. He didn't win any of them, and I'm a little surprised by it. But if I'm going to give you a sheet of the mile and a half, the mile and a quarter, excuse me, I know this horse is bred to go long, but it doesn't mean he has to go long. I'll give it to this horse too. He had a terrible trip in the Pennine Ridge, and that race is not as bad as it looks on paper. And I like that Chad sort of stopped on him. And, you know, as opposed to Frostmourne, who it felt like was pointing to races and then didn't run in any of them, I feel like Chad stopped on this horse after the Belmont Derby and sort of started over. And I think it could really benefit this horse. I love the way he's working coming into this race. And I just feel like if he is going to, he's going to have to pull a trip in this race, and I'm a little concerned about that. But if he can pull a trip in this race, you know, maybe just take him back and make one run with him. I think he's good enough to beat this field. And he's whatever, like 10 to 1 on the morning line or whatever he is. Maybe he won't be 10, but he's going to be some kind of decent price in this race. And I'm just going to bet him and see what happens.
It makes sense to try to, in a race that seemingly narrows down when you can come up with an angle like that. A lot of times, even let's say Ticonderoga is 10s in the win market. It's the kind of horse that you could get a little bit more juice if you're looking at a bet like that late pick 4 on Saturday. The 10th race on Saturday, which is the third leg of the Belmont pick 4. It's also the third leg of that Naira Keeneland cross country pick 4. It's the big one. It's the Jockey Club Gold Cup. Mike, let's keep it with you.
I'm gonna hope David has something really interesting to say about this race. I spent a lot of time looking at it last night. Thought about it again this morning, and then this afternoon when I finally was on a deadline and had to, you know, absolutely do something with it. I settled on Keen Ice. You know, it's not anything that I'm, you know, super happy about. The more I looked at this race and the longer I looked at it, the more I just think, you know, maybe he's just better than these horses, especially at this distance. The mile and a quarter, I think really works for him. I'm not his biggest fan, never have been, but you know what? His last 2 races to me are perfectly fine. I like him at the mile and a quarter more than I like some of these other horses at this distance. And, you know, when I got right down to it, the only other horse that I was really even mildly interested in, along with Keen Ice, was Rally Cry. And maybe I should have went to Rally Cry. I think he'll get the right trip in this race. He really had no shot against Gun Runner last time. His win at Saratoga 2 starts back was huge with a big figure. I don't know if he's really a 110 horse, but I mean, he certainly looked good that day. I don't know. Maybe he can win. He's just one of those horses who I've never liked all that much. I don't know if he's really a grade 1 kind of horse. Not that this is the strongest grade 1 in the world. Maybe he's the right alternative. I don't know. I picked Keen Ice just because I couldn't really talk myself into anybody else. I sort of had it down to 7 and 5. And after that, I don't know. I'm nowhere in here. I kind of only like those 2 horses.
Now, historically, this race was an opportunity for the 3-year-olds to step up and race against their elders. That dynamic has been altered somewhat with the rise in prominence of the Pennsylvania Derby, which seems to have attracted a lot of the head of the 3-year-old class in recent years. But it is interesting to see both Good Samaritan and Pavel show up here to face their elders. David, what do you think about these 3-year-olds specifically, and what do you think about the race in general?
I think one of my first memories of ever placing a bet on a horse race is betting Skip-Away to beat Cigar in the 1995 Breeders' Cup. I was like 8 years old, so I always like to see that.
You're making me feel old, David.
I don't know if there's a whole lot to say about the 3-year-olds in this year's field, though. I mean, you know, I guess Pavel has a chance to keep stepping up, and he was impressive last time, but just seems like a bit of a stretch for a horse with only 3 starts he'd have to be pretty special to win this Jockey Club Gold Cup. You know, like Mike, I guess I've been more of a fan of Keen Ice than Mike sounds like he's been. You know, I just think he's the kind of horse that really wants to go a mile and a quarter. And when he gets the opportunity to do so, and he's not running into Aragona or California Chrome, but he was in form, you know, he can beat most of the horses in the country going that distance. And, you know, his last couple starts, and even going back to some of his races earlier in the year, you know, it's not like he was disgraced in the Pegasus World Cup, even the Dubai World Cup. I mean, it's not like we saw horses closing in that race except for Arrogate, so I can kind of excuse that race. And, he's just run plenty of speed figures that would simply beat this field. And, it seems a little weird to say that Keen Ice is the deserving favorite in any race, but I think he just is here. It's not like he's even dropped as far back out of his races as he has, in past races in the Suburban when he broke okay, as opposed to the Whitney. He was within 3 lengths of the lead in the Suburban, and he still came with that finish at the end. And I just think he's the most likely winner by some ways in this race. So I don't want to get too creative and try to beat him. I just feel like, you don't want to get too creative here. Looking elsewhere, if I had to use others, I guess I would give a look to Diversify on the rail. I don't have full confidence that he's going to get the 1.25 miles, but I can't deny that his last race was pretty good. It's not like maybe the rail was kind of the place to be on August 21st. There weren't that many dirt races that day, but I mean, he still ran, and he beat Governor Malibu. Maybe he's not the same Governor Malibu that he once was, but he beat him by 11 lengths, earned a 108 Fire, a 129 time from US speed figure. I mean, those figures would probably win this race. And, I don't want to ignore that he's the lone speed. Maybe Pletcher's going to sacrifice one of his two, Destin or Rally Cry, to go after him early. But, I mean, who else is going to do that? I mean, maybe Pavel's got the speed to do it. But I would imagine there's somewhat concerned about him getting the distance. So I don't think any of these horses are going to be, hell-bent on going after Diversify and trying to beat him early. So, I mean, if he gets left alone through reasonable fractions, if he gets to go 47 and change to the half, 111 and change, he might not be coming back to them. So, I mean, I do want to use Diversify as at least a B horse if I'm playing like an ABC ticket in the pick fours, because I think he's got a real chance to win this race. Beyond him, Rally Cry, I hear Mike's points. I'm kind of doubtful we're going to see him run back to that Alley Dar just because, he was kind of facing a speed horse that day that really didn't show up, and he took over from that horse pretty early and just, he won off easily. And I know he's got some good races in him when he gets that perfect trip. It's just, I've always been skeptical about how far this horse really wants to go. And sure, he finished up well going a mile and 1/8 with that perfect trip 2 back, but 1.25 miles is a different story, and just not in love with him. He can win. Maybe he's a C for me, but I don't know. I'd be a little surprised if he won this race. Good Samaritan, I guess I could use him somewhere because I really do think 1.25 miles is his game. It's tough for these deep closers in races where there's not a whole lot of speed. He needs a lot of things to go his way to win this, and he probably has to improve a little bit. So, for me, it's mostly Keen Ice, a little bit of Diversify, and I'll have to be really right elsewhere in the pick four if anybody else wins.
The blinkers do make me want to take a second look at Good Samaritan. I mean, it just seemed like in the Travers, he kind of walked out of there and was so far out of touch that, as someone who had some win money on him, you knew that wasn't going to be a factor a quarter of a mile into the race pretty much. David, you touched on him already, so Mike, I'll ask you specifically. Do you give Good Samaritan any count at all in this spot?
I didn't really like the 3-year-olds in here. I hear what you're saying, though. I sort of get why the blinkers going on could be a good thing for him. I mean, I don't, you knew he was going to be, off the pace in the Travers, but, for him to be that far back in that field was a little surprising. And it almost felt like he just sort of, lost all focus early in that race. I mean, this horse he was way behind looking at Lee early in that race. It's kind of crazy how far back he got in there. So the blinkers, I guess, could help him. I just, I just don't see the race that he's run that's going to be Keen Ice. I don't have any problem with the distance for him. I think he'll be fine with the 1.25 miles. I just, to me, the 3-year-olds they just don't really do a lot for me, and I don't want them in this race.
Yeah, the form of the Jim Dandy hasn't exactly covered Good Samaritan in glory.
And he's had, he ran well that day, but I mean, he had that race handed to him on a silver platter, basically. So, he's just really hard for me to take in this race.
The no-shows of the favorites might end up being the real story of that one. I might have to just give him one more chance, at least as a small include out of deference to the trainer and with that sort of wild card equipment change. Let's move on to the nightcap that will be the final race in the pick 4 at Belmont on Saturday. It is a first level state bred allowance, 1.1 miles on the turf. David, how are we going to close this thing out?
I hope Mike has a clever idea in here, because I just kind of saw the two favorites, or at least who I think are going to be the likely favorites, Minsky Moment and Red Knight. To me, they're just the two horses that look like they have a reasonable chance to be okay in this New York bred turf division, and the rest are just kind of ordinary. Red Knight, obviously, he's a half or maybe a full to McKagan, who won a bunch of stakes on the turf. So he's got a right to actually be okay on this surface. His last race, he beat Appealing Briefs, who's kind of a career mated, but he's run some pretty respectable speed figures. And Hobo, the third place finisher, has come back to win and run pretty well against non-winners of one company. So, I mean, I think you have to respect Red Knight, because he might be okay. And Minsky Moment, I know he's never run on the turf, but he certainly has the pedigree to do it. I mean, Flatter's a decent enough turf sire. And the dam has produced Mowbridge, who's a multiple turf winner, and Mississippi Duels, who was also a turf horse. So he's got every right to like the surface. And if he merely translates his dirt form to turf, I mean, he can win this race. Beyond the two of them, it's just like a list of horses I don't want. I mean, Storm Prophet has run plenty of speed figures that put him in the mix, but he just has this string of second and third place finishes and just doesn't seem to want to win races. I wish Jupiter Rising on the outside had done some running last time, or a little bit more running, because he did get shut off late in that final race for Mike Hushin on July 16th. But he just doesn't really have any races on his card that make me think he's going to take the necessary step forward to beat Red Knight or Minsky Moment. So I'm not doing anything creative, but I think those are the two you can lean on the final leg.
Mike, how do you see this one?
Yeah, the two favorites I think they're both pretty tough. I will say that, I guess it's the right thing to do to switch Minsky Moment over to grass, because as David points out, there's a lot of pedigree on the dam side for him to be a turf horse. I mean, I guess Flatters, they're okay on turf. I mean, I hate the Flatters on turf. I guess they win, they're like, yeah, I think he's maybe a 9 or 10% turf sire, but I hate the Flatters on grass for the most part. Maybe this horse will handle it. The problem with him is he's just not very good. I'm going to use him because I think you almost have to. But he's been a real disappointment so far, this horse. And, he's going to have to, to me, he's going to have to be, weak field or not, a better horse on turf to win this, because he's just, all he does is lose at short prices. So this is not my kind of horse. I like Red Knight as a horse. The thing that bothers me about him, I think he might be the most likely winner of this race. And I liked his debut a lot. I don't think this horse is a dirt horse, but he ran well. And then I liked his win last time too. The thing that bothers me about him is that race was July 15th. So, where's he been since July 15th? He didn't work for a good 6 weeks after that. Something happened. Probably not anything major because he's back, but something happened. So, I wonder. I'm a little concerned that he missed time. So I thought he was maybe the most likely winner. I'm going to use both of those horses in the pick 4. And the other horse I'm going to use one other horse in here, and that's the 10 Clutch Cargo. Just because I have a little thing for this horse. I mean, I thought his first start on grass as a 2-year-old last year, which he won, I actually felt like that was a really good performance. He didn't beat a great field in there, but I liked the run that he put in through the stretch of that race. Since he's come back this year, he got off the layoffs there at April after he got shuffled out of position in that race. I thought, they took him way back early. He lost position. He couldn't really recover. And then he was running on at the end of that race. He was third in his next start without a big excuse, except that they didn't go fast pace and they came home, 22 and change on the back end, and he was trying to close. I thought he ran fine, and his only other turf start, he had no chance going 1 mile and 3/8 against Voodoo Song in his last race. So, he was the other horse for me. I was just sort of looking at him hoping, if Red Knight, if something happened and he needs a race off the layoff and Minsky Moment, turns out to be the same Minsky Moment on turf that he is on dirt, maybe Clutch Cargo could come running late and get a piece of this thing at a big price. So they were my 3 horses in the pick 4.
All right, before I let you guys go, I want to give you the opportunity to talk about something else you're interested in betting on Saturday. Could be another race from the Belmont card, could be one of the races at Keeneland, especially one of those connected with this cross-country pick 4 that Naira and Keeneland are putting together. Michael, I'll start with you. Any other race you're excited to sink your teeth into on Saturday?
I don't think I have anything. I mean, I think the early part of this Belmont card is actually really good. There's just not anybody that that I'm like dying to bet on in those races. Maybe, I was sort of interested in giving California Swing another chance in the 5th race. I didn't care for the ride he got last time necessarily, but that's just sort of a wide open race where he looks about the same as everybody else in that field. If he's a good price, I was going to take a shot with him in that race. As far as the Keeneland stuff goes, I like Roca Rojo in the First Lady. I like Chad's horse in that race. I don't have anything that clever to say about the other 2 grade 1s. I thought maybe Divisadero cutting back to a mile in the Shadwell turf. Maybe that would work. I really don't like him going 1.25 miles, which is the distance of his last 2 races. I really prefer him going shorter. Maybe a mile's even too short, but I'm not so sure about that. So I liked him. I don't know what kind of price he'll be. I don't really have all that much. Those were just the 2 horses and the 2 turf grade 1s that I was most interested in.
I should remind everybody that both David and Mike's thoughts on the whole card will be available on the pages of drf.com. And Mike, of course, writing the New York analysis every day. David posting, you post every day in New York, right? Also, not in the PPs themselves, but on the homepage, David?
Yep, every day, highlight horse and my full picks on Naira.com too.
So lots of places to catch up with all the specifics. But David, where are you most excited about putting your wagering dollar on Saturday?
I really just looked at the Belmont card so far, so I'll talk about a few other races earlier on in the day. In the 2nd race at Belmont, it's just a 5-horse field, but I feel like I do have to bet Hookup back in that race. I'm a little concerned that he's not going to get enough pace because it does feel like Pletcher's horse Coppertown that just broke his maiden is pretty much the controlling speed in there. It's just I didn't love the race that horse is coming out of. He beat a pretty weak maiden field. I know the speed figure came back really strong. I'm a little skeptical of it, and I want to see him run it back. But Hookup just had a mildly uncomfortable trip in his allowance return in Saratoga last time. Just had to weave his way through traffic and was pretty green through the stretch. And this is a horse whose debut I really liked going back to Aqueduct last year as a 2-year-old. Something must have happened in the Remsen because he was off for such a long time after that. But I think this horse has shown some real talent. And if Manny Franco can get him a little bit closer in the game early, I think he's got a chance to upset the field at, maybe 4 or 5 to 1. So he's one that I want to focus on early in the day. The 6th race is going to be really fun, just because it looks like there might be some horses with some real talent in there. The 2-year-old maiden race at 7 furlongs. Chad Brown's horse, Allured, ran pretty well in his debut. He's the horse to beat, I guess. Just some 2-year-old sales works that I think you really want to take a look at. Where Montauk, the 2-horse, which I assume is the Pletcher horse that's going to run in this race, since the other one is on the also eligible list. He's got a ton of pedigree by Medaglia d'Oro out of Indian Vale. Just one of these horses that worked 10-1 at the OBS sale. Not the fastest work at the sale, but just one of these horses that looked like he was going maybe 12 flat, and he went 10-1. So just a horse that looks like he might be pretty talented. Obviously, one that's also going to take money at a much bigger price. I also want to use Triple Dog Dare, the 3-horse from Rudy Rodriguez, who just seems like the kind that might get totally lost in this race. They paid $270,000 for this horse. He has like 0 pedigree, but they paid that much because he worked 10-2 at Timonium at the Basic Tipton sale. And it wasn't just your typical 10-2 work. I mean, he displayed this huge stride. I love the way he's getting over the ground. This horse might have some real talent, and he just could kind of slip through the cracks in here. So he's one that I want to just have a few bucks on. It's also the first leg of the pick 6. And then the 7th race, I have to bet back He Looks the Part, the 6-horse for Robertino Diodoro. You just didn't see horses make the kind of closing move that he made in that last race in Saratoga. I mean, there was no pace in that race, and Full Salute just led the field wire to wire. August 16th was the day that you kind of wanted to be on the rail. And He Looks the Part was just closing like a wild horse despite not getting any pace and getting a wide trip. I mean, He was like an hour the best in that race. I'm concerned he's not going to get pace to run into here, but based on his last race, it might just not matter. He was really good that day, and I think he's got a big shot to win here.
We have an audience question I want to ask you guys before we wrap things up here. It was about how the track has been playing at Belmont. How has early speed been holding on at Belmont? Anything else horse players should be aware of about how Belmont has been playing in recent days? Of course, could all change with possible rain expected between now and then, but still a reasonable question. Either of you guys have any thoughts on how the track's been playing? Or does that?
I mean, I don't have a lot to say.
Fair.
No, I did. I thought it was pretty fair. I mean, I don't have a whole lot to say about it. I haven't noticed any, specific trends where, speed was dominating or you had to be, off the rail, anything like that. I think it's been playing pretty fair.
Anything to add to that, David?
No, I mean, sometimes you see horses making these wide moves, but I think it's just the nature of the way the riders, go about riding Belmont. I mean, they're not as concerned with saving ground, so I wouldn't necessarily think those are biases or anything like that. I've seen winners come from all over the place, so yeah, it's pretty fair.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. I want to thank Mike Beer. I want to thank David Aragona. I want to thank our producer, Jake, for helping out tonight and managing the screen share for the whole time. Most of all, I want to thank everybody for tuning in and joining us for this handicapping session. Of course, another shout out to Naira Bets, nairabets.com, racing's best play. Check out this really cool all-stakes cross-country pick 4 between Belmont and Keeneland on Saturday. Go to nairabets.com for a host of other promotions and offers. And if you don't have an account, what are you waiting for? Get going with Naira Bets as soon as possible. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatale. You've been watching a handicapping session produced by DRF.com.